there are green ribbons along the trail that we'll be following, and they can follow the green ribbons and they'll find us. So let's go do this thing.
All right. How long have we talked about this film?
I don't know.
2 years.
Years. Welcome to the Bay Circuit Trail. If you're a turtle and your legs to the ground, sometimes that happens. Raccoons is not sticking like
Absolutely. That's one of the main reasons why they go through it.
One thing we did, gang, we mowed this to minimize the chance of ticks going up your legs. So if you stay in the short grass, you'll probably be less likely to find little arachnids on your ankles later. So that's just a public safety tip. I see we have some people coming up here. Yeah.
That's a Board of Health.
Right, absolutely. So this is where the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission and all kinds of outdoor things meet. We picked this spot though for many reasons. One is because we knew we would get a nice breeze from the southwest across here, so that should minimize mosquitoes tonight. And personally, I kind of like this spot anyway. We're on the edge of the Smitty's Bog property, and the top of the hill, there's a property line, there's a fence there. That's where the Camp Kewaunee property begins. So there's a long shared boundary, and both properties together sort of reinforce each other. This is better because of Camp Kewaunee. Camp Kewaunee is better because of this, and so on and so forth. That's what our theory is, right, Mariah?
Yes, it is.
And is the theory true? Oh, good. Just making sure. Well, we're going to start, I think, and some people know everything that we're going to say, and some people probably know more than we're going to say, but some people this might be new, so we're just going to hit a few highlights. What we're standing on is a 103-acre property that is the property of the town of Hanson under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. And in December of 2011, it was given to the town, not purchased, but given to the town, nominally $1, that's a gift, by Mr. Matt Rhodes of the Edgewood Bogs Corporation. They're based in Carver. And it's the culmination of a lot of communications and a lot of thought processes. But starting with the property itself, this 103 acres, it's the keystone to the whole landscape. Over here we've got Camp Kewaunee, 64 acres. The other side of that is McQuon Pond, 42 acres. There is Indian Head Pond, like 120 something acres. And beyond those trees, a ways over, there's two properties in Pembroke. There's the Andrick Bogs, which is 40 something acres, and the Pembroke Town Forest, which is another 100 acres. And you add all this together, and what you actually have is an unfragmented landscape. There's no paved roads through it, no high-speed traffic, for almost 500 acres. It's pretty close to a square mile. And in this part of the state, this end of Massachusetts, that's not easy to find anymore. Resource-wise, coming out of McQuon Pond and going through the bogs here is the remnants of Indian Head Brook. This is the top of the watershed for the Indian Head Brook area, which is one of the important tributaries for the North River. And the resource of water was used for years and years, decades, for cranberry growing. But when Matt Rhodes, who is a very forward-thinking individual, very generous, we invited him tonight, but he could not be here. He said to a few people on the Trails Committee about 7 or 8 years ago, do you think the town would ever be interested in this? And our answer out loud was, sure, very possibly. Inside we're thinking, how could we possibly afford that? But things come along, they do change, and he gave it to us about 2.5 years ago. But we're also grateful to the United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have an office in West Wareham. They have a program called the Wetlands Reserve Program, whereby wet farm properties, whether it's in the Midwest or here or bogs, if someone wants to cease farming and have the wetlands go back to a natural state, the USDA will actually pay them to do that. And that's how Mr. Rhodes is able to afford to step back from this. But the USDA doesn't just send people money and walk away. They prepared, with the town's help, worked for over a year on a plan of restoration for this whole 104 acres, 103. So what's going to happen within the next year, you'll see changes. The brook will start to be restored. There's going to be a few flumes removed, dams if you will, and the brook will flow more naturally. Trees will be both artificially and naturally allowed to grow. We're going to replant an area of Atlantic white cedars up this way, because Atlantic white cedar swamp is probably what used to be here. You can find stumps now that are probably a couple hundred years old in some of the reservoirs. But that will gradually come to pass. But we made sure that we will retain a system of walking trails all around the perimeter, and a set of dikes that will cut across the middle so you don't have to walk in your own tracks all the time. And so those good things will happen. We also have permission to keep certain vista areas mowed, like this hill and down by the pond, and put up bird houses to enhance wildlife. This is a bluebird box built by Caleb Clemens and Caleb or Elijah, one of them. They gave me 2 bird houses and I lost track of who was which. But we hope that birds that need open space like this will move in and govern themselves accordingly. We did have a lot of help too in planning things from the North-South River Watershed Association, the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game, and the Natural Heritage Program, which is about endangered species, and the Massachusetts Department of Ecological Restoration. The funding for this is coming from the federal funds, but the scientific input, management support, and moral support is coming from a lot of groups. And if I've missed any of them, my apologies to them. The focus of tonight, though, is to, even though this has been open for a while, is to dedicate it, because we haven't talked about the name yet. People didn't know what to call this. When United Cape Cod Cranberry operated this for decades ago, this was Bog 13. It sounds like the name of a bad horror movie, if you ask me. And there may still be a sign down on the post near the road that says Bog 13. I don't know if it's still there. But what everyone knows this property as is Smitty's Bog, because Alton John Smith, the native of this area, lived out on the street there and loved to play other places in town. And he was the foreman for this particular bog, and he was a resource to the United Cape Cod Cranberry Company and did a lot of things for them. And then when conservation commissions were invented, he was one of the members of the first conservation commission the town ever had. You can go back to the old town reports, find his name. And one of the first things he did is he got the Cranberry Company to donate a little space on the shore of Indian Head Pond over here to be a landing place for fishermen and boaters to use. And that's still in existence. That technically is outside of this property. It's a little network of road and then space by the pond that's not under the federal deed. So the town can essentially do what it wants or needs to do there. But on both sides of it, we're restricted from things like motorized vehicles. But back to Smitty. His name was Alton John Smith, but when you said Smitty, everyone knew who you were talking about. Here comes Smitty. We'd love to see him come in the hardware store. He was welcome everywhere he went because he was a great guy. He's a conservationist, a good family man, a sportsman, outdoorsman, good all-around citizen. And we think that he would have been pleased to see this place preserved like this, rather than have houses spring up on the dry ground all around it. So when Mr. Rhodes had the naming privilege, he asked the Conservation Commission, what do you want to name it? We said, well, everyone calls it Smitty's Bog. But he wanted the name reserve, so we called it the Alton J. Smith Reserve, parentheses, Smitty's Bog. The Smitty's Bog is so much easier to say. That's what we've called it. So we do appreciate it being here. It's got a long history. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But rather than keep us here all night, what I thought I'd do is the Conservation Commission had a lot of cooperation from others in town, including the Board of Selectmen, and David Soper, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I think we're going to invite him to say a few words at this point. David.
Thank you. I do remember the dedication from our guest and friend that gave us this land. I was the one that helped vote it in, so it is a privilege to be here. I want to thank all the work spearheaded by Mr. Clemens and many others. I don't want to name names because you're always going to forget one or two people. But it's a great day for Hanson. In addition to providing a good place to raise a family, we are providing and improving its green infrastructure. Hanson has a history of maintaining its rural charm with its open space, trails, natural areas for hiking, swimming, boating, and wildlife enjoyment. These natural features are essential for maintaining a good quality of life and creating a community where nature's peace and quiet can restore our souls. This helps us better balance the challenges of life in a world that is more heavily developed every day. We need places like Smitty's Bog and Camp Kewanee and Cranberry Cove, and we should deeply appreciate all they have to offer to us. Thank you.
Mariah, do you want to say anything about... You don't? Okay. I'll put words in your mouth. The Recreation Commission was all for this because people used to walk around here when they were at the camp and so on, but now it's legal. They're not trespassing on private property anymore. This is ours. And as long as they're not using a motor vehicle other than down by the boat launch area, it's okay. If you see someone on a dirt bike or a quad, please share with them that, just like the sign said, that is not legal, and we'd invite them to return home. So that would be a good thing. Because it's nice to see this slope all grassed in. One spring there was all covered with flowers, and I came back a week later, it was ripped bare by kids going up and down in quads. But we're doing okay. The last official words we want to hear, I think, though, is from the Bay Circuit Alliance. Kristen is here. This property is one of many, many properties along the Bay Circuit Trail and Greenway. And Kristen, you can maybe talk a little bit about that. Give us the perspective of how this fits into that picture. So, take it away. Kristen is the Director of Operations for the Bay Circuit Alliance. And that's part of her job, and we're glad that it is.
Great, thanks Phil. So I'm Kristen Sykes, I work for the Bay Circuit Alliance. I'm also Director of Conservation Strategies for the Appalachian Mountain Club, which is helping oversee the Bay Circuit. And when I first got on the job a few years ago, Phil was eager to take me out and show me the South Shore. And I was already living in Cohasset, so I was very fond of the South Shore anyway. But he took me to this very spot and told me about the incredible work that he had done with the town and with the federal government to protect the cranberry bog. So I think this is one of the jewels actually of the Bay Circuit, and especially the South Shore. It's kind of the anchor of the Bay Circuit as it heads down to Kingston. And so the Bay Circuit Trail is 230 miles, starts in Newbury, so we say it touches the ocean at both ends. But I think this is a area that people don't necessarily know unless they live down here. So part of my work with the Bay Circuit and the AMC is encouraging people to come down here, and this part of property is just stunning, and especially when the leaves turn in the fall on the cranberries, it's just absolutely gorgeous. So thanks to Phil for his tireless work on the Bay Circuit and conservation in Hanson, and to everyone else.
One thing we didn't want to miss the opportunity of it, there's a person here who's very familiar with this property, very familiar with cranberry growing, and very familiar with something that none of us will ever do and very few people ever do again, which involves horses, right, Bill? Right. Bill Scott lives right out in Indian Head Street, and he might have a memory or two about things that he has done here involving said horses.
Selectman Bill Scott.
Bill is a selectman, and he has a little bit of history that you won't hear from anyone else.
I asked Phil how long I had. Let's see, before it gets dark. So anyway, my dad had a love of horses. We lived in Quincy many, many years ago, and he found this farm, which was an old turkey farm, chicken farm, and right up here on Indian Head Street. Just a quick history there. Well, this was going to be the landing place to have his horses, his hayride business, and all that. Along with that, in our moving in, we were next door neighbors to Alton Smith, right across the driveway. Smitty was like a second father to us. Couldn't talk to your father, you went and talked to Smitty. He was always there for you. And we grew up down here. We worked in the bogs. We learned to drive cars down here. Ran along with the horses and all that. My dad ran his hayride business all the way through along that stretch over there. And you could go all the way out to McQuon Street, Route 14 in Pembroke. And then there was a little ice cream stand, which is now called the Lucky Dog. But he would go down there and let the people grab their ice cream. So, but a quick story for you. Hardly a Cranberry Bog owner. There are none that have never either fallen in or driven into a cranberry bog. As you can see, the ditches. My father was exercising the horses one night, and Smitty came up through the backyard, kind of had a sheepish look on his face, and okay, he said, oh yeah, I'm fine. He says, but he said to my father, you think those horses could pull my pickup truck out of the ditch down at the bog? And I said, sure. So we went down and hooked on it with the horse and pulled it right out. But the stories just go on and on and on. Smitty was an avid sportsman. Oh, what he was doing, he was watching a flight of geese take off up off of Indian Head, and he's, kind of looking, and he drove right into the bog, and that's what kind of caused that whole thing. And he came over the night the horses ran away in the yard. We had a problem, and horses got banged up pretty, not too badly, but anyway, he helped us with getting the harness off them and things like. There was always stuff going on around the farm with the horses and everything, but we learned from him how to behave, how to do a lot of things around the bog. And he came in one night and he says, you owe me $20. And I said, what the heck for? Well, we were out trying our BB gun. They have what they call high-low thermometers that they put out on the bog, and it does just that. It records the high and the low temperature for frost nights and things like that for work in the bog. And he's got the thermometer in his hand, and obviously the glass was broken. So we had to work that off to pay for the thermometer. But again, like I say, the stories just went on. My brother grew up with his son Tommy, who's no longer with us, and a very, very close relationship, along with what Smitty had with the whole town. I felt a little bad to see this go, and I hate to pick on conservation because it's a wonderful idea, and thank you, Phil, for doing it. But Smitty was a cranberry man, foreman for United Cape Cod, and so he really, I think he'd been a little disappointed, but just proud as heck that he's being honored by this. And it was kind of a double-edged sword, but he was always there, and he was there for the kids around the neighborhood, and we did everything from plow snow. We did all sorts of stuff with the cranberry bog. Smitty was an avid trapper. There's no trapping allowed in Massachusetts anymore, but they used to trap muskrats. He and another fellow named Charlie Heffler, and if we got our homework done, we could go over to Smitty's cellar, and it was we thought it was fun, but nobody would probably like to watch, skinning the rats. And they would stretch the pelts onto these boards, and they used to store them in a screen house over here, and then they would hold them and they would cure them, and then they would hold them till the price got up on fur, and then they would sell it to the fur company, the people that would buy that. That burned down years ago. Where we're standing, there was a fellow named Artie Jokinen, or Jokinen, however people might pronounce it. But this was actually a box factory for United Cape Cod, where they built the wooden cranberry boxes that you see now. A lot of them are ornaments. They used to build them right where we're standing, and they actually lived in the house. So there was a tremendous, life going on. And I mean, like I say, I could go on for a long time about the different things that we did with growing up. But I'm really proud to see the way this has developed. We're good friends with Matt Rhodes, a good friend of ours, Doug Westgate, who has passed away. He was a person that he did what we call sweeping. He would look for insects and things like that on the bogs, and then he would recommend to the different growers. And he was very close with Matt, and during the deliberations of this, he had to be very careful because they didn't want the information to get out before it kind of all went together for the town and everything. But we kind of knew about it a little bit, and we we kind of agreed not to talk too much about it, but Phil was working on it and all the folks at the time. But thank you for having me. I appreciate you asking me.
Well, you bring a lot to the table, and we know we'll come to you for stories after this. But speaking of cranberries, they aren't being grown commercially, but if you find some growing this fall, they aren't being sprayed. I mean, they're just there. So I think nature wouldn't miss a few handfuls if you needed them. And
Most of these bogs were built, as Phil said earlier, on old cedar swamps.
Yep.
And they didn't have the machinery that we've got nowadays. And oftentimes you'll be working on an older section and you'd be doing some digging and you'd plunk, it'd be a stump that they just couldn't get out. They would cut it and tip it and flatten it, and then they would grade over it with the cranberry bog and stuff like that. So
yeah. And those cedar stumps, are kind of some in the reservoir over there, the wood in there could be 200 or 300 years old.
Yeah.
Because cedar, especially underwater, just doesn't rot.
right.
The last thing before we do this ribbon thing over here is you mentioned the Jockinen family. They lived here, and before there was a Cranberry Cove, before there was a town beach, little kids would learn to swim over in McQuan Pond. I know my mother learned to swim when she was about 10 years old. She was good friends with Irene Jockinen.
There you go.
So that resource is still available, it keeps on giving. The bog is still here, the environment is still here, and we are too, so that's a good thing. To bring this to a close, a lot of times they do ribbon cuttings. We're not going to cut it, but I want Mariah to come over here, and Kristen, and Dave, you want to come over here, this side of this thin green line. This is flagging tape. It's not a ribbon really, but it's biodegradable. It's the sort of things we use outdoors in marking things. So what we're just going to do is you just take your thumbnails, we're just going to rip this tape open and declare Spinney's Bog is open to everyone. And now we're going to stroll down back around to Camp Kiwanee for the Mass Walking Tour concert, if you can stay. So that's it.
Good job, Phil.
Enjoy. The walk was one thing. I'm glad you all survived. I hope no one's lost out there in the bog. I hope no one's got too many mosquito bites. But this is my favorite part because someone else is going to do all the work. But we are having an event here that pulls together the outside and the inside, the environment and the arts. And this group of people who are hiding off to my left are the Massachusetts Walking Tour. They have a great website. If you haven't been on it, tonight when you go home you can check it out again. But they do something completely unique, which is they walk trails, and this is their 5th year walking trails in and across Massachusetts, and they bring the art of music to small towns, communities, everywhere they go. They walk a trail, come to a town, they sit down, take the instruments off their backs and have a concert. Next day they get up, they walk to another town. They have been walking almost continuously since the city of Newbury. How long ago? 2 weeks?
2017.
Yeah. They started walking, and with one short car hop yesterday from Framingham to East Bridgewater, they basically walked, carrying the instruments all the way from Newbury to here. And starting tomorrow, they're going to walk to Kingston and have one more concert down there. But this is the Massachusetts Walking Tour. They've got a mission that they can explain better than I can because they're the ones who are living it and doing it. And so what I think I'd like to do is let them introduce themselves, talk about themselves, and then see what else happens. So the Massachusetts Walking Tour.